Hi guys, and welcome back to the Learning Gardener. If you haven't been here before, my name is Pip and this is my backyard in a Zone 10 garden in the south coast of New South Wales, Australia. And today we are going to be wrangling these Nema climbing roses. They are in their second growing year and the amount of growth is just mind-boggling. They're now partway through their second flush of flowers. Their first flush was just beyond incredible, and each vine was so long and so laden with flowers they were sagging down into the archways. Recently, I had bought a new archway to put on the front and back of this archway tunnel that runs through my veggie garden beds, which has the climbing rose front and back. And the idea was that the new archways would be placed beside the old ones and just help sustain the weight and the enormous growth of these beautiful plants. But just before I constructed them, I noticed that they had rusted through and needed to be replaced. So, what I'd wanted to do was build something that wasn't going to collapse because recently the same sort of archway snapped under the weight of the tromboncino vines and I had tromboncino vine everywhere. So, with the help of my best friend who lives 3 doors down, her three beautiful children, and her husband, we managed to wrangle some Rio mesh down the side of my house and flip it and put it in place. Rachel and I had actually cut this Rio mesh previously, maybe about 4 months ago, and we had put arches up in both of our garden for the first time, and we'd found it really difficult to do, just the two of us, and we were totally exhausted by the end of the day. So we did deliberately bring reinforcements with us. Last time, even with the help of the delivery driver, we had not been able to move these 2.4 meter wide, 6 meter long Rio mesh trellises down the side of my house without getting it stuck on the guttering. But with all six of us, we managed to do it. And I cannot thank them enough for helping me. It was light afternoon work by comparison to what it was for Rachel and I to put in the much narrower archways. And we just slid them over the top of the roses. I had already roped the roses down to the best of my ability to try and prevent any damage, although of course there was going to be some. But then once we got them wired in and in place with some long stakes, we went back out the front to cut up the last Rio mesh and take it round to Rachel's house. Once everyone was gone, my job was now to untie the wire and to try and free the roses. And even as I look back at this video, I'm exhausted just thinking about doing this again and overwhelmed with the idea of having to do it again. Thankfully, with the new Rio mesh arbor, I will never have to do it again. The Rio mesh will be fine. I had such a hard time unwinding these. I got stabbed so many times. And then there came the problem of how do I get the rusted out archway out from underneath, and how do I get the stakes that were holding those archways up out. So I still haven't managed to get the stakes out. But what I ended up deciding to do was to take it bit by bit and first unwrap the roses and see what kind of state they were in. I wanted to avoid cutting them completely back. If I was going to have to do that, I wanted to wait ideally until winter. So I went around and tried to work out how this was going to happen. I had cucumbers growing on the other archways and tried to work out if it was going to be possible to unthread those and remove the archways. And ultimately what I decided was these were healthy plants and they were fairly happy where they are. So what I'm going to do is leave them where they are and let them grow, and when they die back I will remove the two middle archways and just pop them somewhere else in my garden and probably use them to grow things like sweet peas that are quite light until they finish rusting out and head to the tip like the two that were holding the roses. But for the two that were holding the roses, they already had cracks in them. They were not long for this world. So I had to come up with a game plan of how to get them out. And first I went through and cut back any dead branches, any snap branches that I could see, dead-headed any roses, got rid of any leaves with black spot or any stressed areas. And then it was time to bust out the bolt cutters that we had bought to cut the Rio. And I was so glad we bought them last time, because we did try and grind through the Rio, and we went through a lot of discs. So the bolt cutters have actually come in quite handy. So the strategy here was to try and move the vines that I could out of the way to make it easier to get the bolt cutters in. And then it was just a matter of muscle and patience, and bit by bit I managed to unwind these roses and get the arbors all set up. So this is the journey of getting 2 new tunnel ways in the garden, and hopefully lots of climbing space for years to come. The only downside is that it does cast shade on some of the garden beds, which is not really a problem in summer because we're flooded with sun and there are plenty of beds, but perhaps is going to be an issue depending on how wide these roses get in winter. But we'll see how we go, and we'll see how the roses recover from this massive, massive effort. But it's looking pretty amazing, but I cannot tell you how much work it was to get these roses back and organized on this arbor. By day 3, I was starting to make some real progress and just finishing by tightening up the top part of the roses up to the arbor and trying to make it so that I was able to pull this rose back far enough to attach to the new arbor, which was a little bit difficult because some of the canes really had thickened up quite a lot and were happy where they were. So it took a little bit of effort. I hope that by the time the twist ties that I put on break down, that the rose will know where it's supposed to live and will stay there. It is quite a beast of a plant. Thankfully not that thorny. I had deliberately bought the Nema climbing rose because, number one, it has a beautiful colour to it and it's supposed to be fairly disease resistant, and so far it has been. But also because it's supposed to be a minimally thorned rose. I don't know that there is such a thing, but I do know that the Munstead David Austin rose is like the thorniest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I'm just glad it's not a climbing rose, because you get snagged all the time, and I do get snagged occasionally on these roses because they grow so quickly and I'm not very good at keeping them controlled. but hopefully now that will be easier because there'll be more space to attach them onto something, whereas they had well and truly outgrown the arbors that I had for them. And it did take me a good 3 days to do this because the weather that we're having here in Australia at the moment is obviously summer. We're halfway through summer and it is just so humid at the moment. It is making 28-degree days feel like they're like 45, and it just feels awful, and it's almost intolerable to be outside past 9 a.m. or before 7 p.m. So it is really hard to get work done in the garden, and to a certain extent you just have to suck it up and do it. But it was an awfully difficult job, and the fact that I was getting stabbed as I was doing this did make the motivation a little bit low. But I also wanted to just get this done so that I could move on, and because I know that the garden beds are getting very full of produce, and I wanted to be able to film a garden tour and a garden harvest, which we have coming up next on this channel. So hopefully we will see you in those videos. But first, it is time to wrangle the roses. This rose was a lot easier to wrangle because it was not as big as the one at the front of the garden, and that is, I think, purely a sunlight situation. It gets way more intense sun at the front of the garden, whereas this one doesn't get as much morning sun as the other one, but it's still a very happy rose. It's just not quite as humongous as the other one, but it too has a cucumber growing on the other side of the arbor. So what I did was cut the arbor off just above where I'm attaching the cucumber now, and hopefully no one stabs themselves on the top of that in the interim. It's definitely out of puppy reach, which is the main thing. And then I'm training it onto the arbor, and as soon as the cucumber dies back, I will remove what remains of the arbor. While I was doing that, I noticed that there was a little Raffy Staffy that had somehow got trapped in the berry garden. I don't know how he'd managed to get himself in there, but he couldn't get himself out, and he was crying and just being terribly cute. So we had to stop and help the poor little chap out. He's such a good boy, but he can be a bit of a mischief monster, so he's probably trying to steal a berry. But finally we got the job all done, and it was a great relief. It's weird seeing the roses now so tamed and organized, but I'm loving the way the arbors look, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and hopefully we will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.